Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Kaiser, and for today's episode, I have two very special guests here with me. I have on Mark Robinson and Scot Lade. They are former members of one of the OGs of the Fort Pierce hardcore punk scene, Foul Existence. Guys, welcome in. How are you?
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for the invite, Jeff.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you both on. I've been looking forward to this episode because when you really do some hard research, you can't really find a ton of information on Foul Existence. However, seeing some of the flyers and hearing some of the stories ahead of our episode, there's a lot to share. So I'm glad to have you both on to tell the story today. And before we get into that, I'd love to do a quick introduction to listeners and viewers out there who may not know you. Mark, we'll kind of start with you. Tell listeners and viewers out there a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, right now, I'm currently living in the Ohio area, Cleveland area, and I have a little record label that's I consider more of a collective kind of thing, Scott being a part of it, called Punk Media, which basically, I try to do projects with eclectic artists like Tiny Tim and Gigi Allen and Sleepy LaBeef and people like that. Back in the day when we had Foul Existence, that was in the mid 80s, there wasn't much of a scene back then. So in fact, there was no live punk bands around our area. There were some in Tampa and the Miami area and even up north, but in our area, there was nothing. So we just, myself and Brian Small, who was the singer, we just decided to start Foul. And, we didn't know how to play instruments. In fact, I still don't. But we used to make this thing called anti-music where we just bashed this crap out of our instruments and, call it good. But anyways, that's kind of it, and then I kind of met up with Scott because he was managing the record bar in Fort Pierce, which had the most amazing selection of punk records and hardcore records probably in the state. I mean, Scott was bringing in titles that now go for thousands of dollars back, so it was pretty awesome. That's how we kind of got to know each other. And
I was real fortunate, Mark. Yeah, because I landed in Fort Pierce and there was like this ready-made punk scene ready to explode. And I was given carte blanche to order anything I wanted. It was a chain store. I mean, Record Bar was the third largest chain in the U.S. at the time, behind Musicland and Camelot. But anyway, we were better than them because they gave their managers a little bit of discretion. And I brought in, no matter what weird punk album I brought in, it would sell. So my bosses did not care. So they kept upping my budget every month. Like, you can just keep buying from all these distributors, all this weird stuff. And I'm like, okay, it's selling. Why not? It was a really wild time in history because this was a chain store and it became like a magnet for punk rockers and all these skate punks and, a few straggler surf punks. It was just a real weird burgeoning scene. At the time, I thought it would have made like a great reality TV show.
It probably would have if reality TV had
existed. And then Mark and Brian, who was the singer, before I joined the band, I moved into town to open the record store in the Orange Blossom Mall. I was already in a band. I was in Disorderly Conduct. And these guys were doing this crazy thing at a disco, at a dance club every Thursday night. Tell the people what you and Brian had going on there at the Gemini Club.
So the Gemini room in Fort Pierce it had been around forever since, I shouldn't say forever, since the late 70s. It was all about the disco thing. So it was half the bar was a disco and half of it was country and Western. And they had, mirror ball, lit dance floor, strobe lights, the whole 9 yards. We convinced the owner to let us have one night to spin punk records in there and have it called Punk Night. I think I might have sent you some of those flyers. But you know, it was pretty nuts in there. Every Thursday we had quarter beer too, so we get everybody amped up on crappy beer, and it would just absolutely go. We do these sets of like new wave, then we move it into hardcore, and all the skate punks would come in there and, you know, slam and all the rest of it, diving off of everything. And we had the strobe lights going. It was a real spectacle. And everybody was coming from all over the state to come and see this because word kind of got out. And it was, again, weirdly in Fort Pierce. The funny part was that the country western side, those guys had never seen punk rock or anything. So these guys would come over in their 10-gallon hats and they'd see bodies flying through the air and, you know, black flags cranking and playing. And it was just mayhem, you know, and these guys, it was just an interesting group of people coming together. And I think that lasted over a year. We did that. Every time it was, every night was something new. It was great stuff.
So I want to talk about the early beginnings of Foul Existence and when the band formed. How did the band get its name? So what do you remember of the early beginnings of that?
Yeah, this one is obviously Mark because I was not present at the beginning, the genesis of Foul Existence.
Well, like I had mentioned, you know, we didn't have any musical background, myself or Brian, but we wanted to start a band, banging around, just making some noise, doing whatever. So we did that. We did this thing called Anti-Music, and then we were figuring, okay, well, maybe we should try to find a drummer. So we knew this surfer guy, friend of ours, Scott Uneros. Scott with two T's is how we used to refer to him because Scott has one T. And he drummed with us for a while, and then he just got, I guess, probably burnt out on our antics and the stupidity of everything involved, and decided to not do this anymore. And then we picked up this guy named Jerry Montanaro, who was, I think he's a cop now, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, which is kind of funny. But and then Jerry was kind of into it, and we started to sound a little bit good, and we started rehearsing it at Jerry's house. And you know, we actually started making a few songs. I mean, we sucked, you know, but we were still we were good enough to start banging out a few songs. And our guitar player, his name was Donald Coyle. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. But you know, he was pretty flexible. We're kind of all of the same kind of mode, and we're just working through trying to get a few songs to bang out. And you know, then we met Scott from the record bar, and if I'm not mistaken, actually before Jerry, I'm sorry, we were practicing at Brian's house in Port St. Lucie. That's where the cops used to show up. You used to come there and hang out, and we were just terrible.
You guys were bad. You guys were just terrible.
Yeah, terrible. And you know, we never really got any better. It just,
I don't know, man. I saw a spark there. I saw there was magic in the chaos there. There was.
Yeah, there really was. You know what it was, though, honestly, is when we first realized, wait a second, maybe we could be good. And this kind of is jumping forward a little bit. But it's when we went up to Casey's house and plugged into those freaking Marshall stacks. And we actually sounded decent. Because I remember Donald and I looked at each other and we're kind of like, oh my God, we sound good. Even though, you know, I was terrible. I mean, but there was loudness and fullness, and, you know, it wasn't just this tinny little ghetto blaster type of awfulness. So that's when we were like, well, wait a second, maybe we can kind of do this. And then that's when we brought Jerry into the band, I think. And we started getting some songs together, and then.
And I couldn't wait to record you guys. I had no idea at this point that I would be later on joining Foul Existence, being part of the Mania. But I could not wait. So I stole Casey's 4-track that we were demoing all the disorderly conduct stuff, took it down to Port St. Lucie, over to Jerry's house. And, you know, the only thing that was stopping us was when we'd run low on beer. But, you know, man, those were good songs. And they're still classics today. And what I did was basically I burned a cassette, and I sold them for like, I I would like burn multiple copies of Memorex tapes that we sold. I'd just open them up and, I'd be selling fifth, sixth, seventh generation tapes for $5. I think I might have sold like 30 of them, man.
Well, I think that those were the ones, though, after I had moved to New York City and you actually took over in the band, you guys went in the studio. The ones that you were, the recordings we did on that Tascam or whatever that you took from Casey's, one of those songs ended up on that Florida Punk Explosion cassette.
Right.
But then the stuff like that you were selling on cassette, I was in
Oh, that was a different session. Okay, yeah.
That was and I actually just located recently within the last 2 weeks the master tape of that.
No way.
So we want to kind of go remix that or remaster it or do something to again beef it up a little bit somehow. But we just found Brian had it stored in one of his wherever. So that surfaced recently, and that's kind of exciting. But anyways, yeah, it was all pretty lo-fi stuff. And but again, going to Casey's house and plugging into those Marshall stacks was like, okay, we could actually do this if we had a little better sound. And I think that's right around this when we started doing those schoolhouse shows.
Yeah, that was it, man. That first schoolhouse show, 1984. It was disorderly conduct, foul existence on the bill. And we rented this schoolhouse. I got this high school kid. He looked all clean cut to go in. Oh, my mommy and daddy want to rent this out. They've got some kind of, bridge tournament going on. So they had no idea what was going to hit them, man. It was amazing. Next thing you know, we had 600 punk rockers from all around the state descending on this schoolhouse. And Foul Existence more than held their own, man. That was a good show. That's when I realized that this band, maybe they don't have the gear that Disorderly Conduct had with the money that we had at our disposal and that kind of stuff. But they were a great band. So later on, when they lost their bass player, man, I felt the need to step in.
I wonder who that was.
Well, it was kind of funny because I had known Casey going back way before, because I was a skateboarder and so was Casey. So I'd run into Casey at all these skateboard contests throughout the years. So we were familiar with each other. And then years later, when I was living in Daytona Beach, there was this little club in Ormond Beach, Florida called the Wave Club. And it was the only kind of punk club around in the state, I think, at that point. So Casey would run up there with his girlfriend, and I'd bump into him at the Wave Club. So it was just kind of funny. Then when I descended back on Fort Pierce and, met Scott, and Scott was in Disorderly Conduct. I mean, it was just such a weird thing where, Foul Existence and Disorderly Conduct were almost meant to be together, which I still would love to put out a little 7-inch, a split 7-inch or something, but
never too late. Never too late.
Yeah, well, we're trying to get a hold of Casey. That's the biggest problem. I tried to do that when I started punk, and Scott knows how it is dealing with Casey. It could be a bit challenging sometimes. So, we never kind of pulled it off. But who knows?
I've had Roger Deering on the podcast, who was in the Drills, and the Drills are on the Florida Explosion cassette compilation too. And Roger said he's still in touch with Casey. I think Casey still is out west.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
might be able
Drills,
to connect with
just for whatever it's worth. I think, Scott, you were at this show when we went down to Flynn's and we saw. Were you? I think the Drills opened up. I think it was Suicidal Tendencies.
Yeah, I was there.
They just were so good. In my opinion, they were way better than Suicidal. I mean, they just kicked ass that night. It was
Casey
amazing.
was there that night.
Who?
Casey was there that night too.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I remember he and Mike got into it a little bit from Suicidal Tendencies.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of funny. Well, old school skateboarders and whatnot.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was, I think merging up and getting together with Disorderly Conduct kind of gave Foul a little bit of boost. And then we did a show after that Disorderly Foul show. We did a solo show. That's the one where I got arrested at. And that was a real fun little event and all that surrounded it. And that kind of cemented Foul as being the favorite band of the Fort Pierce Police Department. They seemed to show up at every one of the gigs after that. So
we had to be clever about what we were doing.
yeah,
At the end, after wearing out our welcome at what the Sons of Liberty or the Knights of Columbus or whatever kind of hall we could get our hands on, the Hungarian Cultural Hall. All finally we had to resort to renting generators and doing shows out in the middle of the Everglades.
Yeah. Well, you remember the show? We did this one show, and it was kind of funny. Like Scott said, we couldn't, nobody would rent. We couldn't get a gig. So the following we had was these skateboarder guys and the skate punks. And actually, I'm still in touch. And one of the guys, Mark Bunsey, his band is on punk. They're called Double Truckers. They're out of Jensen Beach. But anyways, so these guys, they were doing a skateboard demo at the skate shop. I think it was called Island Water Sports or something like that. Whatever. Anyways,
That's
they
exactly
announced,
what it was.
yeah, they announced we were going to do this thing. So these redneck guys showed up there, and they were hammered. When they showed up, we start playing. The kids start slam dancing. Well, the rednecks didn't know, and one of them punched Bunsey's sister in the face. All hell breaks loose. They beat the crap out of these guys. This is in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around. It's literally in the middle of woods off of US 1, probably a mile back in the woods or whatever. There's nothing around. And, these guys got pissed off because, they got their asses kicked, and they came back with chainsaws. And they literally had chainsaws and were chasing everybody with chainsaws, man. Like, it was for real. These guys were pissed off, drunk, and didn't like punk rock at all, and we kept hearing, me and my girlfriend at the time kept running into the woods, and we kept hearing the chainsaw start and stop and start. And we were thinking, oh my God, they're just slaughtering people back there.
It's like out of a horror movie.
It was, man. No shit. It was crazy. Unfortunately, one of the little skate punk kids made it to US 1 and got to a phone and called the cops, and the cops ended up showing up. And the cops ended up like bitching at the skate kids, and they ended up helping the chainsaw guys find one of their chainsaws, and let him go. And one of the skate punk kids got the guy's badge number, and I think he was either suspended indefinitely without pay or fired. I can't remember which one, but they got in a lot of trouble because they were, they didn't handle that situation.
Well, these are the obstacles that we had to overcome. We
Oh,
had
man.
to lie and obfuscate to try to find places to play. And then there were certain venues around that we could play. Foul Existence never had that kind of privilege where we got to play opening for big bands. We were more of an underground kind of thing. We kind of always wanted to stay that way. But when I was playing with Disorderly Conduct, even there, we would always encounter problems, and it just hurt when the problems weren't from law enforcement, but rather from your fellow punks. You guys, you weren't punk enough, or you're too punk, or you're this, or you're that, or come on, man. It was crazy. But the thing that it spotlights is just how dangerous the scene could be, man.
Yeah.
It really could be. It wasn't just, oh, look at them. They're slam dancing. They're throwing elbows and whatnot in a mosh pit. That's so dangerous. The whole scene was dangerous and incendiary. It absolutely was. You could feel it every time you walked into an actual punk gig, that there was revolution in the air. And that's why that American hardcore scene can never be duplicated or replicated, even though folks like Green Day can make millions and millions of dollars because the energy and the spirit of it absolutely was just incredible and amazing. And that's all right. Somebody had to make money doing that kind of music. So we don't begrudge them. But, the Florida hardcore scene was so bizarre because we didn't get a whole lot of bands roll through our way. Think about, going all the way to Florida if you were a punk band back in the day. So the few that we did get, a lot of times they'd stay at Casey's house. So, we would get the benefit of a lot of that kind of exposure from different bands just because even if we weren't on the bill with them, they'd probably be spending the night with Casey. So,
who were some of those bands you remember that were coming down?
well, probably the biggest thrill was having Scream at the house because I was such a huge fan already. And having Scream and Marginal Man just like flowing back and forth through the house all the time whenever they were in Florida. Very, very cool, very memorable. And just watching Scream in Casey's bedroom. The great Skeeter Thompson. I remember one time he's watching Popeye the Sailor Man, and the band has been like jamming just like, like Fish or Government Mule or something for the last 2 hours on one song. And then next thing you know, Popeye the Sailor Man comes on, they're watching TV, and Skeeter's like in the middle of a song. I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, are you serious? The level of musicianship in that band was just insane. It made me realize that we needed to step up our game a little bit. That punk rock wasn't just, 3 chords and a cloud of dust. It could actually be something more too. And that DC scene definitely was, what I was looking at the time, trying to emulate.
That Scream and Marginal Man played at Flynn's, and it was one of the really great shows back then. That I remember that as being a standout double bill. There were so many great shows at Flynn's, which was really surprising because, for the gas money back then for punk bands all the way to Miami, that it was a big expense, Jacksonville, okay, because it was, or Tallahassee, because it was upstate, and Tampa, but man, coming all the way down to Miami was another expense. We did actually, Foul Existence did open up for Government Issue in Gainesville, Florida.
That's right, the Gainesville show.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I remember I broke my bass string like minutes before we were supposed to play, and I didn't have any extra bass strings. And it was really cool. The guy from Government Issue said, well, you could just use my bass. And I was like, really? Wow, cool. It was that good spirit.
And who else was on that bill? Is it Man in the Box?
I think Man in a Trap is what they
Is that?
called.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Man in a Trap. God, what horrible grunge song was I just thinking of?
That's Alice in Chains.
But,
yeah, Man in a Trap. Good band. But Government Issue. Oh, John Stab. Genius.
Yeah, that was a fun time. But that was the biggest show I think that Foul played, at least when I was there. I don't think you guys did it.
No, that was a good show.
But yeah, so like Scott was saying, Foul really never, it wasn't like, some of the bigger bands in Florida, like Disorderly Conduct or Rat Cafeteria or Pagan Faith or any of that. We never got that kind of exposure. We were just this tiny little bunch of weirdos in Fort Pierce that would, we were always running around. We're always in the scene. We did Scott was doing a thing at Record Bar, and we were doing that thing on Thursday nights at the Gemini Room. And then we'd play whenever we could. But every time we played, it was an event because of disaster, not because it was this great show. It was, there was either a car crash or an arrest or, something getting closed down or stuff getting smashed. And it wasn't like we were even that kind of band. I think it was just more that nobody gave a shit. We were kind of into a little bit of mayhem and, kind of Butthole Surfers, kind of let it flow and let it go. Whatever happened, happened. So we didn't really stick by that strict hardcore, set of rules. In fact, we made more fun of that shit than anything else. And that might have been some of the problems. And I think, from what I understand, some of those Florida bands down there like F used to, do similar things to piss people off. But we didn't try to piss people off intentionally for some reason. It just seemed to happen. I don't know. Whatever. Maybe it's because we sucked. But our biggest audience was the skateboarders and the surfers. They seemed to really like us, which I sent you, Jeff. I sent some pictures to you of all those people outside. That was my going away show to, that's when I moved to New York City, and then Scott took over. That was the last gig, but that was so classic because all the kids were slamming, we're playing, and all the kids are just going nuts outside there. And the cops, because we get done with the song, and everybody's like shaking each other's hand and patting each other on the back. And the cops didn't know whether to arrest somebody or what the hell to do. They were like, we don't get it. What's going on here? Right. They didn't understand the concept. And we're fighting with them. Just let us do one more song. Just let us do one more song. And we had rented the Foul Manor. At that point, we were living in the Foul Manor, which that's a whole nother story, which was just literally a stone's throw away from the cop station where I was at when they arrested me. So it was just a funny, kind of irreverent bunch of idiots having a lot
Was
of
it like a
fun.
punk house?
Yeah.
It was
Oh, the
absolutely
Foul
a
Manor
punk
was,
house right on the Indian River. It was actually a beautiful piece of property.
oh, it's
I mean,
amazing.
it was gorgeous, and we just destroyed it.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing. That place had been around since the late 60s. The guy, I was building boats at the time. How we found the place was I was building boats, Maverick boats at the time. And the guy who owned the mold to the hull, his dad owned that. And we needed a, I just mentioned one day at work, man, we're kind of needing to find a place to live. And he's like, well, this place is available. And that the place itself had been, for a decade, had been home to like all these surfer guys. So it was kind of just a bit of a flop house, as it were. So Foul living in there, naturally it was a hand in glove sort of fit. And it no longer exists because it was
Yeah,
burnt
it's
down.
gone, and that's probably for the best, because if the walls could talk, man.
Oh my god. But yeah, the Foul Manor, I think Surin even talks about the Foul Manor in his Crate Digger book. Bob Surin, in his book, he's talking about the Foul Manor a little bit. But yeah, that was quite the place.
Yeah, you know who reached out to me not too long ago, because I have turned my back on the beloved punk rock and have become the guru of all things prog rock of late. And
Nice plug.
somebody found me via one of the prog rock forums, the aforementioned Scot, the original drummer of Foul Existence. Scott with
cool.
Yeah, he reached out to me not long ago, and I thought that was amazing. And the first thing he said was, "Did you know Foul Manor's not there anymore?"
Yeah, Foul Manor got burnt to the ground in an unfortunate little incident, but probably shouldn't talk about that too much. But yeah, that's great that Scott reached out to you, man. He's a good guy. He's a really good guy.
Yeah.
Who was the person taking those photos at that show with the backyard and all the people out there? Who took those pictures?
That was a dude named Bob Montanaro, who was our drummer, Jerry. That was his brother. And, Bob and I actually did some experimental music when I moved back from New York, did, just stupid shit. But Bob was very into photography and video. He's the one who also shot that video footage that on the video that I have on my channel. Right. So Bob was always at our shows taking pictures and shooting footage. I have no way to get a hold of him because he's got the motherload of a bunch of great photos, some of which I'd never seen. But if I'm not mistaken, and Scott could talk to this, is after I left, I think Bob continued to show up at the shows and take pictures. I think there was one show where didn't Brian, and this was after he came and visited me in New York City, and we saw that legendary Butthole Surfer show in Cafeteria, where Gibby basically, had sex with what's her face on the stage that night. That was an insane show. But when Brian goes back to Florida, I'm pretty sure he did a show where he decided he needed to take off all his clothes and sing naked too. So
he did, and the reaction was not at all what he probably expected.
What was the reaction? Because I never really heard that.
It was this really weird, slow, gradual evaporation of the crowd.
Really?
No one said anything. He mentioned anything. Just slowly but surely, before he took it all off, we probably had a good 100 people. Within 10 minutes, there was maybe 2 or 3 people lingering around. Everybody had found their way to their car.
That is so funny. I didn't know that. Oh,
complete alienation. I mean, you talk about alienating your fan base. He did it right there in one fell swoop. Yeah. Foul was basically over right then and there.
That's so funny. Oh my God.
But my only regret is that for whatever reason, we did not decide to at least put out a 7-inch or something at the time. Because you look at how collectible some of those, even the same goes true for Disorderly Conduct, even though we did do our 12-inch. The grade Amen. Man, I wish we would have done a 7-inch.
Yeah.
And same for Foul, man. So at some point we need to rectify that, Mark.
Yeah, I've already, yes. I've talked about that with a couple different people. I agree. And I still think a DC Foul split EP would be the absolute. So if Jeff or you, Scott, talk to Casey, please encourage that, or put him in touch with me so I could talk to his ass. I actually would like to talk to him. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I hope he's doing well. He had some health issues, I know. So, but
the only official, well, I don't know how official it even was, but the only release I'm aware of that came out was the cassette tape, right?
Yes. Yeah, back in the day, and
Your Foul.
Yeah, on that Florida punk explosion, and I put the the Foul Existence Mind Your Manor EP is up on Spotify and all the streaming.
And thank you for putting that out there, because again, very hard to track down a physical copy of the tape. And
I don't have one.
I don't have one. So
someone has one out there.
It's out there.
It's out there somewhere.
Paid good money.
Yeah. Well, even that Florida punk explosion cassette is hard to find. I was desperate for money probably about 2 or 3 years ago. No, maybe more than that, 5 years ago, and I ended up selling my copy of that for $100. But the other show, Scott, we did. Scott used to be involved in he would put on these, at least a couple of them that I know, where there was the Hardcore Holocaust, where I think that was a VFW hall. Yeah. And then there was another one that
I did like 5 or 6 actually in total before we had to take it into the woods.
But those are legendary, because we had bands all over the state coming in. And my favorite band from any of those shows, man, was Jesus Fish Super Beer, or Nat King Skinner, whatever the hell they were calling.
I think they were calling themselves at that time Nat King Kong.
Oh, Nat King Kong.
And their lead singer was the great Jesus Fish Super Beer.
Yeah.
Who was famous from previous bands like Antler Joe and the Accidents and Descent into Alcohol and Barbarism. The guy's an absolute legend. John Keane, wherever you are. I haven't talked to that cat in a long time, but what a legend, man. Nat King Kong. They played like one song, just some weird version of Sex Bomb by Flipper for like an hour.
Yeah, and dude had the gold lame pants on and with the salami stuff down his thing. So good, man. It's one of my favorite shows of all time.
But that was the same show where Phil from F, right before the set, takes a hit of acid right before the set begins. And that's on video, so that's a lot of fun too.
That was at the American Legion in Jensen Beach. Were there a lot of shows there?
All these were one hitters, man. We were never back in. I'd send in my proxies. I'd find the cutest little girl or the most innocent boy. I'm having my sweet 16 party. I want to rent this place out. And apparently word spread, because that didn't work for too long. But man, we made some hay. Those are great.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. The gigs themselves are great, because I mean, it'd be like 7 bands for $2 or something. It's ridiculous, and there are all these classic, legendary Florida bands now, and somehow Foul squeezed their way on. If I'm not mistaken, that Music for the New Youth, that thing, I have a flyer for where you could send away to get that on VHS at the time. So that was recorded on video, and it's out there. I've just never been able to track down a copy of it. It'd be really cool to see, though.
Was that the one Rat Cafeteria was at?
No,
I can't remember them all.
Yeah,
they all blend together.
It says Rat Cafeteria. It says Rat Cafeteria, No Policy, Pagan Faith, Gay Cowboys in Bondage, and F.
Oh, nice.
Music for the Youth. That was at the
that was Jensen Beach. But the one where Jesus Fish and the one that was
that
was some Port St. Lucie venue.
I don't even remember what that was, but that was insane.
Yeah, that was nuts.
And those flyers are amazing. Who was the one that was putting together those flyers? Was there one specific person, or was it like a group?
No, we all did them.
Yeah, it was just whoever. It was. I know Dolan was involved. I know you were, Brian.
Yeah,
everybody took a crack at it.
Yeah, we
They were
just get
fun.
drunk and put them together and, whatever, which is all the fly. That's the other thing. The aesthetic of all that hardcore stuff back then was really cool. All that DIY. I mean, just, we've all seen the walls full of flyers for back then and how cool it looks as a big ass collage.
Yeah,
So,
but think about how we were idiots back then too, man. I remember me and the bass player from Cowboys In Bondage, for whatever reason, decide, oh, I know why I had backstage passes, front row seats with backstage passes to see Styx.
oh, nice.
So we go to see Styx, man, and for whatever reason, he injured his leg. He's on crutches. We're right up there. It was one of those venues, no security between us and them. And right when he starts singing Babe, the guy decided it'd be a really good time to take his crutches and jab him in the groin.
No shit. Nice.
And then he went running. Clearly, he didn't really need the crutches. They were. It was a ruse all along just to get at him. The things we did. You see, we thought that was funny.
Well,
that's horrible. Well, what were we thinking? That's terrible. Committing assault on somebody just because we don't like a song. But that's where our brains were at. We were punk rockers. We didn't know no better.
Yeah, it was funny, man. That was good times back then.
You know who did the artwork for the cassette cover?
Yeah, that was me.
How did you, Scott?
One of the best too.
That was me. I remember that.
Stickman, right?
Yeah, I was at work. And I remember vividly. Yeah, those are classic. But yeah, just stick them up at the counter. Yeah, we sold Memorex and Maxell tapes, so I just crack a couple open, burn, dub a couple tapes, and put them on sale. Just ridiculous.
Did you guys DIY your own T-shirts and stuff too?
No shirts.
No shirts.
Well, there might have been one or two, but it was just like
one off.
But like nothing for the mat. I mean,
Donald,
us taking a Sharpie and writing "Foul Existence" on a white Hanes.
Donald was the master of the punk rock T-shirt, though. I mean, he would come up with the coolest stuff. The coolest catchphrases. He made a T-shirt one time that said, "This ain't no circus, you scum clown," which sounds kind of tame, but back in '85, it seemed really cool, right? I mean, and then he had this one where everybody had shirts that said, "I'm with stupid." He had one that said, "I'm with stupid," pointing down. I think he made a few Foul Existence shirts too, but that was the thing. I mean, really super creative people. Mark talks about, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to play any instruments, stuff like that. The reality is I'm a huge prog rock guy. And to me, the best musician in Yes was the guy that didn't play any instruments. That was John Anderson. So to me, Foul Existence was a band full of John Andersons, guys that thought musically, maybe couldn't, play a 40-minute keyboard solo like Rick Wakeman, but had the brain, always hearing stuff musically. That was Mark, that was Brian. The Foul was just amazing. And like I said, one of my biggest regrets in life is that they didn't put a 7-inch out while they were still going, because man, you look at the market out there. What is that? Some of those 7 inches by the Eat and some of these bands, the Panics and stuff. It's like some really, really good price points right now. It'd be really fun.
Oh man, I bought my very first punk show I ever went to a zillion years ago. I was skating down at Solid Surf in Fort Lauderdale, and somebody went through there, and the reactions were, that old, the old punk band. They were doing a show. It's like it was the first punk show I ever went to. I was kind of blown away by it. But I bought a copy that night of Communist Radio for $2. And it just, I ended up, of course, selling it for, I can't remember, about $1,500 or something like that, whatever ridiculous price. Just can't believe people pay some of that, money for these KBD singles and stuff. It just blows my mind.
Japanese collectors, man.
Oh my gosh.
In love with American hardcore punk from the early 80s. It's insane.
It's totally insane. And to your point, Scott, had we put out a 7-inch, man, that thing would have probably been fetching a few $100 by now, which would have made us laugh even harder,
Oh, yeah.
But yeah.
It adds to the, the whole legend of Foul Existence. If you add the entire career of the band, I think we probably only did maybe 20 shows total.
Yeah.
And each one something really, really memorable or really, really bad happened. And I think that's kind of why the legend has grown so much.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because it certainly wasn't the songs and the music. Although it was, looking back, it is kind of cool. But that little cassette that you produced, though, that was, I was listening to that not too terribly long ago. I think there was like 5 or 6 songs. That was pretty good, I mean, even though it was extremely lo-fi, it was still pretty cool, I think,
That's fun. Donald had his D Boone Fender guitar tone going totally 100%.
Yeah.
And Jerry, hey, you know what? At the time, Foul Existence and Disorderly Conduct had the same rhythm section, because Bill Irwin went AWOL for a little while, and we had to borrow Jerry. So we did quite a few gigs with Jerry. So me and Jerry, as the rhythm section, we were serving double duty in both Foul Existence and Disorderly Conduct. So, things actually got kind of sort of semi-professional with Foul Existence. And as a result, it just kind of wasn't the same band anymore. It needed Mark Robinson to give it just that bizarre, weird, I've been playing classical guitar since I was 5. So at the time of the Foul, that meant what? I'd been playing guitar for, 30 years almost. I mean, so I lent a level of musicality and precision and virtuosity that was absolutely uncalled for in the Foul Existence. Didn't belong there whatsoever. I'm trying to play like counterpoint bass lines and stuff. Brian's singing about how evil Beatrice the corporation is, or why any beer over $2.19 isn't worth having, and I'm just trying to do all this. It was ridiculous. Obviously the handwriting was on the wall, but we had a lot of fun.
When I first met Scott, literally, I met him in the record store, and we kind of hit it off pretty instantly. So I ended up going to his apartment. He lived on South Beach in Fort Pierce, and I saw this classical guitar there, and I didn't even know Scott was a musician at that point. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Do you play? And he picks this thing up, and he just, left my freaking jaw on the ground at how good he was. I just absolutely couldn't believe that this guy with this much talent, I mean, seriously, was playing and or interested in punk music and all that stuff. It really blew my mind. So Scott is a absolute amazing musician.
I grew up listening to the prog in the 70s, but man, it let me down. It started to get really, really bad and boring and unlistenable. And then I walked into a record store, and I seen this album cover with these 4 dudes with ripped T-shirts and jeans and leather jackets, and the guy's like, "You're not gonna like that, man." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You like those bands?" Like, "Yes," and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Genesis and Jethro Tull. "You're not gonna like that." And I'm looking at it, and every song's under 2 minutes. I'm like, "Oh, I think I'm gonna like this." And I was right, man.
Had to be the Ramones album.
Yeah, it was that first Ramones album, and my life was changed. I didn't listen to prog rock again probably for another 30 years.
Yeah, that's great, man. Oh, I something popped into my brain. I just wanted to mention to you guys. I was talking to Malcolm at TPOS a couple days ago. He's reissuing the Gay Cowboys in Bondage 7-inch.
Whoa,
Kind of
nice.
cool. Yeah, I'm trying to encourage him to release some more of that stuff. He was, because he was in Broken Talent, and that's a whole nother weird how that all worked together too. When I found out that Malcolm was in Broken Talent, many years later, when I was dealing with Gigi Allen, and I had heard about Malcolm. We started talking, and he mentioned he was in Broken Talent, and I was like, wow. And then he tells me, he was like, yeah, well, I was the DJ at Flynn's and the manager, or worked at Open Booking Records, and I was like, how crazy is this? So it was just this weird, and continues to be this weird thing of, I don't even know what you call it, incestuous kind of, And the fact that me and Malcolm were just joking about this the other day, that all these years later, we're still kind of putting out music and still talking about, this stuff and re-releasing, I mean, like I said, he's playing bass for Anti-Scene now, but, talking about re-releasing some of that South Florida stuff because it's classic. And I'm of the opinion that South Florida, or Florida in general, never got its due in the American hardcore thing. I think there was one page in that in Stephen Blush's American Hardcore book, when they talked about Florida, they kind of just glossed over it. The reality was, and it was a bit weird, not as weird as maybe Texas, but Florida had a lot of really great, creative, killer bands coming out of there, man, that weren't just of the punk rock, things like Morbid Opera, or what was that synthesizer band, Futurist, or, there's all kinds of stuff, and we were, when we started, we were influenced like by the Butthole Surfers and the Residents, even though we loved the hardcore stuff, but it was just, there was just all this weird, I don't know. It's just
Florida's
cool.
a big state,
Yeah.
If you really think about it, if you're driving from the Alabama Florida line to Key West is 888 miles. I mean, it's a big state, and unless you've got some unifying thing, either a really big name band or a label or that go-to venue, which we had some good ones, but it's like, again, the logistics of getting to Florida in general kept a lot of bands away. So I think we had a lot of things going against us, but retrospectively, we had a lot of great bands in the Florida scene. A lot of them were very short-lived, though, and that's another thing that we had going against us, was we'd have these bands burning super bright, just like looking like they're going to take over the world, and then man, where are they? They're gone.
It's really interesting with regards to that, because there wasn't really any that I could think of, like any hardcore punk bands from Florida that kind of popped really big. I can't remember.
Oddly enough, if you talk to punk intelligentsia around the country, maybe Roach Motel might be the one that's best known.
Right.
Yeah, and here's again back to that interesting connection. The guy who took that Gigi, the Carnival of Excess photo, he was the drummer for Roach Motel, Frank Mullen. He died. So, but it was just funny again when we, started meeting and talking, and it was like, oh no shit, my band played with your band 10 years ago or whatever. It was just weird how all of it fit together in that.
It was a weird time. It was a weird scene. Again, if you look at how small it actually was, just in terms of the number of people that were in it statewide, we'd see them at a Tampa show, we'd see them at an Orlando show, same faces in Gainesville, same faces in Tallahassee, same faces in Fort Lauderdale. Wasn't that many of us, but you know what? The impact that we had, and that the punk scene, the American hardcore scene of the early 80s had, completely outsized the record sales or lack thereof. We were punching so far above our weight, it wasn't even funny. And the impact of what we were doing reverberates even to this day. And so, as, a member of the scene, we have a lot to, be proud of, and that we were, a minuscule part of it. And if nothing else, what amazing stories we have to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And we took a lot of shit for liking that kind of different music from, because you got to, especially when, younger, even before I met Scott, when we were, a lot of those, let's just say, agricultural folks, they weren't appreciative of that stuff, So I remember being I got decked one time at a party. I just walked, I was at the door walking into this party, and I had a Nevermind the Bollocks Sex Pistols shirt on. And this dude, without even saying boo to me, he just reached back and decked me right in the face, man. It was like, damn, totally unwanted.
No, we had to look out, because at Disorderly Conduct, we were a little bit more metal-y, because we loved us some Metallica and thrash metal and Iron Maiden and stuff like that. Obviously came through in our music, and certain punk rockers did not appreciate that. That didn't fit their bill whatsoever. I thought we were prescient. I thought we, were way ahead of the curve, kind of a band ahead of its time. But some people didn't think that, and we had a few scary moments at some gigs where we were actually running for our lives from skinheads who wanted to do us harm, and we weren't that scary a band. It was me, Casey, Ken, and little old Bill Irwin. Ken Decter's not scaring anybody, so it was it was a fun time, but you had to be willing to stand up for what you believed in and be more than ready to run away when it got a little hot.
Yeah, man. Good times, good times.
How many shows did you guys play as Foul Existence where you didn't even play on stage? You just played on the floor, or it was one
Most
those
of them.
situations?
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much. I mean, at least when I was in the band, well, you did have a stage at the maybe the VFW, one of those shows.
Yeah, if you were playing with Disorderly Conduct, Casey, he needed a stage. He had to have a drum riser. The drums always had to be mic'd, even if the guitars weren't. He just, he was already a rock star in his mind when he was 12 years old. So yeah, any show with Disorderly Conduct, we had a stage.
Yeah, but there wasn't, if I remember right, there wasn't a lot of them, but we'd play anywhere. I mean, several times, the skate kids they just want us to set up on the ramps in the woods. So we did a lot of those shows where we just played, not a lot, but I don't know, 3 or 4 where we're just playing out in the woods on ramps, and they just run a generator and, I mean, none as fun as the chainsaw episode.
No, but I remember my dog being part of the whole, circle. Everybody, in the middle doing their thing, and my dog nipping at their heels while they're, slam dancing in the mosh pit. It was good times.
Yeah, it was a lot of good times.
Did anyone in your families make it out to any of these shows to see you all play back then?
No.
Did they know what you were up to? They know what you were doing?
I remember one time I was living with Casey in Melbourne, and I don't know what they were doing. I think my dad had like a ham radio convention or something he was going to in Daytona. So they decided they'd stop by, and I'm pretty sure they regretted that decision because it was crazy. I mean, Casey had the half pipe in his backyard and the Doberman pincher going crazy, totally destroying the inside of the house.
Fucking dog.
That place was crazy. And my parents came for a visit, and I think I might have played them a track that we were working on. And they were like, okay. I don't think they understood, really.
Yeah, my family life was so disastrous and weird that, whatever. I mean, they didn't have a clue what I was doing at any point in time. So, but Casey's house is really interesting. And I remember I used to love going there because, number one, we could plug in and play out of good equipment. But his parents had money. So he, Casey had all the cool import albums and the VHS. I remember wanting to see the Great Rock and Roll Swindle Forever, and we went to his house and he had a VHS copy, and it was like, holy crap, because you couldn't get any of this stuff anywhere. And Casey had all the cool stuff. And
he wrote to every band, every label, convinced them he had this band called Disorderly Conduct because he was making these posters and these flyers and these stickers with the name Disorderly Conduct. He had everybody fooled that this was a real band for 4 or 5 years before, he even had a band. So all these labels were sending him stuff, man. I mean, this cat had every single release from every single cool, underground punk label. It was just amazing. Everybody wanted to come to Casey's house because he had everything.
Yeah. I remember one time Casey was really straight edge at this time, and we obviously weren't. And I remember Casey was like, you can't bring any beer and pot in here. And we're like, okay. And we just walked in and started drinking beer and smoking weed. But his damn dog, that Damien guy, that thing, I remember you guys were rehearsing in the back, in the back part. And that dog had me and Brian trapped, gritting his teeth. He was ready to attack us, and we're screaming. And we, Casey, get your ass out of here. And nobody could hear it because you guys were killing it, in the back. And that dog held us hostage for 15 minutes, man.
What kind
Like,
of dog was this?
it's fucking crazy. I
Crazy
remember
Doberman.
Oh, it was a dope. Yeah, I remember Scott was telling me, yeah, we try to kill that thing all the time, spraying Raid and its food and shit like that. Dog wouldn't die.
It's terrible.
You know?
It would not. Oh, the things we tried. It was just terrible. Yeah, you weren't the only one. That dog trapped me more than once. It wasn't very friendly to me either, but when Casey was around, it was okay to me. And I lived there for like a year, and that dog never really learned to like me. It was terrifying.
Was it you that was telling me? Somebody was telling me he got into somebody's bag of weed and ate a whole bag of weed.
That was me.
That was you? Okay.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, that dog slept for like 2 days straight. I was mad because I just bought it.
That's so funny.
Did
Yeah.
Foul
Yeah,
did Foul Existence? Did you guys ever share the stage with any straight edge bands?
Government issue. If they were straight edge, but I don't think they were. No, we
I don't
were
think
so
so.
anti-straight edge. We used to
Yeah.
make fun of it, because we were just a bunch of idiots, and listen, it wasn't any kind of like, anti. It was just that's the cool thing about the scene back then. Everybody just did their thing and nobody cared. Some people got a little militant about that stuff, but
Yeah, they did.
you know,
Occasionally, but a lot of it was talk.
Yeah.
Casey wanted Disorderly Conduct to be a straight edge band so bad, right? And I was smoking weed every day, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's the end of that. And so yeah, we talked a lot of crap, but at the end of the day, we were just kids playing punk rock music, and trying to have some fun, trying to stay out of jail.
I think there was one time me and Donald were just we were putting the X's on our hands and getting drunk just because, just to make fun of it all. But everything, I just always remember everything being in good fun back then. There wasn't, at least from our perspective. I know there was some people that were a little more militant, but we were of the opinion that punk rock was supposed to be fun, not uniforms and rules and all that other stuff, whether it was societal rules or punk rock rules. It was all whatever,
Yeah, but that's what happens whenever you get a group of people in a room and there's a certain understanding. There's going to be codification of said rules, whether spoken or unspoken, and then you get the stratification where we're going to shame the jock because he doesn't know every song by the Bad Brains. Hey, the dude's here having a good time. He might be here to start a fight, but whatever, man. He paid the cover charge. Leave him alone. There was a lot of that "I'm punker than you" type of stuff going on too, which is just hilarious in retrospect to think about. But yeah, in general, it wasn't too bad overall in the Florida scene, I don't think.
Yeah, man. We did this one show where we actually it's where that footage comes from of that video that's on the Punk YouTube channel. We actually decided we were going to enter a battle of the bands thing, because there was this rock band that was the king of the Fort Pierce thing. We were just kind of trolling back in the day. That was a great fun time too.
Oh yeah.
We actually got second place, which meant nothing because I think there was only 3 bands. But the fact that we, didn't get third, was pretty amazing.
What kind of music? What kind of music do you remember the other bands being in that contest?
The guy who won it, and I think Scott, that was that dude with the frizzy hair who had the studio that you guys recorded in.
Yeah.
But I can't remember his name. But they were just a rock band, playing rock songs.
Yeah, his name was Frank. I can't remember his band's name, but
I can't remember either. But those guys were a lot of the rock music or music in general back then, at least in Fort Pierce area. Everybody was very concerned with being technically proficient, and we were just the opposite. So that's why we kind of entered this thing just to troll this whole thing, because we were like, well, let's just go up there and suck and see, what people say. So we did, and we actually didn't suck, that day, which,
Now, the whole thing with Foul Existence and the Gemini Room and everything that was going on caused a little bit of a stir. When I opened the record bar in the Orange Blossom Mall, and the import section was obviously the one that was raising a few eyebrows. I started hearing of local preachers that were actually praying over me and my staff because of the satanic music that we were bringing into town. And then the local TV station did a whole half-hour spread about punk rock in Fort Pierce, and it was absolutely incredible. The horror, the damage, the danger that punk rock poses to our youth. Oh, it was amazing. It was a lot of fun.
I found that. I have that on DVD, the Fort Pierce Punkist, because remember the lady kept calling it Punkist because she had no clue. But I'm gonna rip that and post it on the
not a
YouTube
punker,
channel.
but a punkist.
Yeah, you're a punkist, not a punker. It was so funny. But I will be ripping that and posting that probably within the next month or two on the YouTube channel.
Classic.
It's must-see TV. They brought a psychologist in there to try to analyze. They went and brought cameras into the Gemini room, and they're interviewing people. It's just really funny because, again, got to understand, Fort Pierce at the time, man, was just rodeo kind of. Gary Stewart was the country artist that was from Fort Pierce, so it was very And just the fact that the second side of the Gemini room was full on urban cowboy country. And that was their idea as a club, is they wanted to get the urban cowboy and the John Travolta, the Saturday Night Fever, and they'll get the best of both worlds. And then we came in with punk night.
And then you came in.
But here's the thing. All of a sudden, after we started doing punk night, they got new carpet. The parking lot got repaved. They fixed the signs. They were making money. That's why they put up with us. They were making so much money because we packed that place every Thursday. And the majority of people weren't drinking the quarter beer, so they were making money hands over fist. That's why they put up with that crap for so long.
Yeah. You don't put up with all those punk rockers unless you're making money.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only reason you do it. And it was always fun to see the other half, the country and western side of that club. Because you would think there'd be like this weird, like nasty friction. I'm telling you, it really never surfaced. If anything, there was like this weird curiosity, like we were zoo animals or something. And they were looking up, what in the hell going on over there, Billy Bob? Look at them, they're punk rockers. What do you think about that, Joe Lordy? And I'm sorry, it's not my fault, that the girls on our side were better looking than the girls on your side.
Yep. Well, and the funny thing is they'd see it and they'd run away and drag their buddies. You got to come and see what
exactly. You'd see one appear, and then 5 minutes later there'd be like 10. He just went and grabbed his buddies. Oh, you ain't gonna believe this, Billy Bob.
Were there a lot of girls coming out to the Foul Existence shows back then? Considering there were, seeing some of the photos of the wild, crazy, reckless people that would come out and and all that.
There was something going on, Jeff. It wasn't as much in Fort Pierce per se. There was something going on just south of Indian River County in Martin County. And I know Mark can agree with me on this. There was something going on in Martin County, Stewart in particular. Martin County High School was all punk. Every single person, you were either a skate punk or a surf punk or a hardcore punk. You were some kind of punk. It was the weirdest thing, man. It had to have been the punkest place on the planet, if ever there was such a thing. This nice, very middle class suburban county somehow became the hotbed of punk rock in Florida. And so we got a lot of boys and girls at the shows. And
I would say
amazing.
That was probably 90% of our audience was those people from the Martin County, coming up to see us. It was all the skate punk kids. There was, maybe not 90, but a lot. Those people were coming up. I mean, there wasn't too many people at that point in Fort Pierce proper.
And when you're thinking about other areas that are in that vicinity, like what about like Vero or Jupiter were there shows going on there as well, Hobe Sound, and there was some stuff going on. I think there were some venues in that
There were a
area.
couple things going on. And what was fun was for a little while there when we had Jerry in the band, disorderly conduct. Let's see, Jerry lived in Vero, Casey lived in Melbourne, I lived in Fort Pierce, and Ken lived in Lake Worth. So we were just scattered all up and down the coast. So if there was anything going on, we knew about it.
Yeah, man, that was how many Scott, how many shows did you guys do after I left? Like when I moved to New York, like was it 10 somewhere?
Yeah, probably about that.
Yeah.
Probably 8-10 shows. We
Yeah.
tried to keep it going for a while, but then it was about time for me to leave Fort Pierce. And yeah, another
Yeah.
sad story where I took my talents to South Beach and went to Miami.
So and on that topic, what was the like? How did Foul end? Was it just kind of a natural? You guys all went. Everybody just kind of went their own way.
Yeah. It was pretty much.
It had run its course, kind of thing.
Well, I was working at Record Bar, and they had fired all their managers in Miami, and they had been begging me for month after month after month to move to Miami. Then they finally decided to give me a big old raise, and then my no's turned into yeses, and then I think Foul just kind of, that was the end of that.
Yeah, well, the Record Bar, probably the Record Bar, and maybe even the Gemini room below it, but that was the heartbeat of that whole, music scene in Fort Pierce at the time. I mean,
yeah, you could hear the music at the Gemini. You go into the Record Bar to buy it, and then you could see some of these weird bands at some of these, shows we were putting on, here, there, and everywhere. There was definitely synergy, and that's what happens when you've got all these different things happening simultaneously within one cluster, and that's how a scene grows. And we had something going on, definitely.
Yeah. Well, and then you throw in Flynn's. I mean, we were running down to Flynn's every time there was a show. We'd go down there, which that was a great little venue. I mean, we saw some classic shows. I remember you guys opening for the Exploited down there. That was a fun night.
There is.
Who do you think picked up the torch after bands like Foul Existence and Disorderly Conduct and a lot of those other local bands from that period who were playing with you guys? Who were some of those bands that you can remember that came after that picked things up and continued on with what was happening?
Yeah, I completely checked out.
Yeah.
I remember my 25th birthday. Seriously, I sold all my guitars except for that classical guitar, that Jose Ramirez classical. I kept that, but I sold my Marshall stack. I sold my bass amp. I sold my bass guitars. I sold my electric guitars. I cut my hair, and I bought a suit.
Ooh, you really checked out, Scott.
Yeah. I was done, man. I was done. I was turning a new leaf. I was gonna, try to be that guy. Hey, it was the 80s, right? Wall Street had just come out. I wanted to be Gordon Gekko, right? I wanted to be that guy driving the Lamborghini. Obviously never happened, but that's where my mind state was. Moving to Miami was terrible, a horrible idea. It just messed with my head. I'm working in a mall. It used to be I'd like park next to regular cars. Now I'm working at like Bal Harbor and Aventura. Next thing I know, I'm parked next to Lamborghinis and Maseratis and Rolls Royces every single day, and it starts messing with you. Start feeling inadequate. Yeah, not good. Not good at all.
So you never had a moment where you were just curious and said, I wonder who are these bands playing at some of these places like Churchill's in Miami or maybe some other places? Did it ever spark your curiosity? Even though you checked out, did it ever spark your curiosity to kind of see what was going on still?
I had the urge, but I never acted on it. Yeah, it took a while for me to, I guess I was a little jaded, and I really wanted to turn my back on it. So there was a good 10 to 12-year span there where I really made a conscious effort to not listen to the radio, to not go to shows, to not buy CDs. I guess it was CDs at that point in time, just to be completely divorced from it. And eventually it always calls you back.
Well, and with me, I had moved to New York, so I kind of was away from, Florida in terms of what music was going on down there. And then from New York, I moved over to Ohio. Um, and let's see. And then I actually came back down to Florida, which is when I started working with Gigi. So I kind of was, doing some producing or whatever you want to call it, but not really going out too terribly. Well, I take that back. We're seeing some shows in Tampa. I mean, there was a lot of good music going on when we were, doing the Gigi thing and everything down in Tampa. And Brian and I and the woman who was my girlfriend at the time, she sang backups on the Gigi record. We were all living in a house together in Tampa, and we were going to a lot of shows. But I don't really remember much locally that I was gravitating toward. Maybe Clang. There was a band called Clang, because I was worried. He's the guy that Paul Reller is the guy that facilitated the Gigi and Tiny Tim albums. But I don't remember like specifically any local bands going, wow, these guys, and then I moved back to Ohio, and then I completely lost touch with Florida scene.
Were you at that show though, Mark, that Gigi played and the Roids opened up in Tampa?
Yeah, and actually on my channel, I review the show. That was at the Harbor Club. It was above a seafood restaurant.
What was that like? Because I heard when I had Gino on, he mentioned about the shit getting thrown, but I guess that could have been any Gigi show, maybe, possibly.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you having
It changed a lot because, and I had seen hundreds of shows, hardcore shows, living in New York. I was at CBGB's every Sunday for the hardcore matinees, and it seen tons and tons and tons of shows, the Butthole Surfers all over the place. Then I saw Gigi at that show, and I had read this interview in Maximum Rock and Roll, and I was like, whoa, hold on, pump the brakes. What's this guy all about? Because the interview was just so insane. I was like, this can't be real. So then I was living in Fort Pierce at the time, getting ready. I was finishing up community college, getting ready to move to Tampa. And the woman, we'll call her Razor, she calls me up and she's like, hey, that Gigi guy is going to be playing over here. And I'm like, really? So I bolted over to go see the show. And he was supposed to play in Ybor City at this little club called Arts Alive. The fire marshal got wind of it, shut it down, so they had no venue. So these guys somehow, and I interviewed the restaurant manager after the show, just for my own sake, because I wanted to hear his take, but somehow they convinced this guy that Gigi was just this, acoustic guy that's going to play James Taylor songs and Jimmy Buffett songs. And, it's not going to be a big deal because this is above a seafood restaurant. People are eating oysters Rockefeller down below. Gigi comes, and I remember being outside and we were, doing a little tailgating or whatever beforehand. I looked, I'm like, God, who's that scummy looking, really nasty looking dude, in my head. And I didn't know who, whatever. So a couple minutes later, we're in the thing, and I'm like, oh, that was Gigi, So he does his thing, and I'd never seen anything like this. Like when he started up, it was just like, oh my God, the fury and intensity was unmatched. I had never seen anything like this. And he's breaking bottles over his head, and he's running at people, throwing stuff at people. And, then he takes his clothes off, and he's naked. And this guy, here's the thing. It wasn't just that. He looked like he had bathed or been around a shower, or just wide open gashes and cuts all over his body. He looked like he had been to war. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, holy crap. So then he does his thing, and then he did the, he crapped and threw it at everybody, and then, the venue clears out. And I thought, show's over. Well, they got him another mic because he'd broken, I don't know how many mics. They got him another mic and let him go again. So he came on and did a second set. I couldn't believe it. The place, it was in July, I think. It was in the middle of summer. It was hot. Place smelled like a sewer. It was just disgusting, and it was just the fact that it was above a seafood restaurant just, of course I got a weird sense of humor, so I loved it. And but it was fury like I've never seen. And Gigi was, gosh almighty, that was so intense. And I remember he did a little interview, and it's on YouTube, after the show. And I was standing real close to him just because I couldn't believe the spectacle of this guy, how beat up and badly he was, and he was still able to do this. And his teeth were all bashed out, and blood was everywhere, and he was ripping hair out of his head. And I literally saw him just take a bite out of his skin and spit it on the ground like a hunk of, I mean, it was just insane. So of course I had to find out more about him, and he ended up getting tossed in jail and blah blah blah. And I found his address in CMJ when I was living over in Tampa, and I wrote him, and he wrote me back. And just one thing led to another, and I wanted to do a big professional full interview with him to sell it. Well, we did that interview, but we just kind of, him and I just kind of, I don't know, we just kind of meshed together. And I started helping him do press releases out of prison. And then we started working on a book together called The Ann Arbor Incident, which never came out. And then I went up to North Carolina to shoot the photos for the Anti-Scene album. And I approached him. I was listening to the Johnny Thunders acoustic record a lot. And I approached him because he did acoustic music that I thought was hands down his most powerful. And I said, man, let's do a whole album of that that's somewhere in the middle of the horrible lo-fi and the really good hi-fi of the Thunders record, something that was a little more in the middle. And it just evolved into a country album. And next thing you know, Gigi's sleeping on my couch, And had I thought for 1 second that, a year later or whatever it was, that this guy at the Harbor Club show would be at my place for a week, that's one of those things where you go, yeah, no, I never in my wildest dreams would have thought that. But the Harbor Club show was something to be remembered. I think they're still talking about it down there. That was crazy. Never, and I interviewed the owner after that, and he was shell shocked. His eyes were huge, and he's like, they told me he was just going to be playing something off James Taylor and Jimmy Buffett. I had no idea. He was freaking out a little bit. It was just, it was really funny. No harm, no foul. I do remember some, back then, everybody, the girls were wearing the big hair with all the hairspray and the puffy hair. And I saw this girl walking by because, she was leaving. And poor girl, she didn't know, but she had a big piece of poop stuck in her hair because she had so much hairspray in her hair, she didn't know it. I was like, man, that's going to be a smelly car ride. Shrink, or I shouldn't have said that name. Razor and I were just laughing at each other, just because, again, it was just sad but funny, I guess.
Hilarious.
But anyways, that was the Harbor Club show.
I can't get past the way you describe just the smell. I mean, that alone, I just can't even
It was
imagine.
Foul.
Yeah,
it was foul.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and again, it was just, there was no air conditioner up there, so there was sweaty bodies, and then Gigi doing his thing, and it was just like, ugh, really gross.
Sounds like a nightmare.
Really yeah, does. And oddly enough, that show has become a bit of a, Gigi at that point, it wasn't too long after that that the Secret Service finally caught up to him and threw his ass in jail. He was an interesting individual.
Did you ever play Foul Existence for Gigi? Did you ever hear it?
That is a good, I didn't play it like when we were hanging out in Tampa, but I made him a bunch of tapes. And I think I did put a Foul Existence, because I made one tape of just random weird shit. When he was paroled in Ann Arbor, I made him like a whole, 10 or 20 tapes. He didn't have any music, and he's like, can you send me some music? So I did. And I think I did put the Foul Existence on one of those, but it was very unremarkable to him, and he never mentioned it. So, and I never brought it up.
Maybe because he didn't get a chance to see Foul Existence.
That's right.
More of a live band, I feel like.
That's right.
Yeah, right. That would have been fun. Opening up for Gigi would have been a fun. But he did see the Foul Existence flyers at the house, and he was aware of, of us. But, whatever.
Did you guys have any zines ever include you in any write-ups of any kind?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a little skateboard zine out of Gainesville that did a little thing on us. I think that's how we ended up getting the government issue show up there. And I think we were mentioned a couple times in Maximum Rock and Roll when they did their scene reports.
And then there's some other thing like in Hollywood, Florida, that some girl put together a zine, only lasted like 3 or 4 issues. I think we were in that too.
Mm.
But, yeah, I forget what that one was called. But yeah, Maximum Rock and Roll, I think we were in there a couple times. I know they reviewed the Disorderly Conduct album.
Yeah,
But I
I
think
remember
we
that.
were in I think they mentioned Foul a couple times.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't they? I mean, come on.
A fair question.
Yeah, man. Good stuff.
Yeah. What do you remember about the very last show that Foul Existence played? Like, was it planned that this was going to be the last show, or was it one of those situations where the last show just turned out to be like that was it? Wasn't really planned. Like,
Yeah, I don't think it was planned. I don't think we knew ahead of time that it was going to be the final show. Had we known, we would have done it with way more fanfare. But it would have been one of those, hey, Billy Joe's got a generator. Let's fill it up with gas and let's head out into the woods and make some noise type of deal, which shockingly enough, pre-internet, somehow people found out about these things.
Isn't that crazy?
How do they know?
Yeah, it was just so weird when all these people would show up and we're like, how did that happen? We
There's
passed
no
out the
Instagram.
fire one time and all of a sudden there's all these people.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So yeah, it was one of those deals, completely immemorable, indistinguishable from any other Foul Existence show, and that it was terrible. The sound quality was awful. A very, very bad PA was being used. You couldn't hear anything Brian was saying, completely unintelligible, but the show was absolutely amazing and magical in every way.
That's awesome. And my last show with Foul was those pictures I sent you.
Yeah.
Where we were playing outside.
That should have been the final show.
Nah, I don't know, man. I like the fact that you carried it on. I was always stoked that it was still going on. When I was up there in New York,
the stench will never end. The Foul Existence stench will last. It'll outlast us all.
The last time I was in Fort Pierce, I drove by where the Manor used to be. It's just kind of funny how that downtown area is so built up now, and obviously the land is what was valuable then, but I just have to chuckle, at the nonsense that happened at that place. And it was literally, Jeff, I'm not kidding you. It was a small stone's throw, literally right across this little overpass thing was the cop shop. It was the cops. So, I mean, we were doing all this crap literally right under their nose, It was just really kind of funny. They never showed up at the house, but they'd show up at our gigs every time.
That's why I love those photos too. You see the cops in the background, in some of those photos. So can only imagine what they were thinking.
What do we do? What do we do?
Exactly.
It was always just a matter of time. We knew how every gig was going to end. They ended the same every time. It was just a question of every band on the bill would get to play first.
Yeah, right. I don't know, Jeff, if you had a chance to read that. I sent it to you, but it's kind of hard to read. But there's that arrest report.
Yes.
That was one of the nights, and that was one of those nights where literally we didn't even. I don't know that we made a flyer for that show, whatever. But crap loads of people showed up to that, and some girl got a Heineken bottle bashed off her face, thrown from up on a roof, and it was just, there was a lot of ugliness that night.
I would like to read one excerpt from that report if I could. Deputy Hoxie, and this is a direct quote from that report. Deputy Hoxie remained by patrol units while I entered the building to see a subject sitting on the floor holding a microphone screaming, "Fuck, fuck, fuck, yeah, fuck, fuck."
Yeah. That was me. Yeah, and for that I got arrested. But it was all the other stuff probably too. I still, to this day, I was like, why you guys, whatever. They just needed somebody to arrest.
You
It
are
had
the
been
first.
building up.
You are the first to ever send a police report along with the photos and stuff like that. So there you go. That speaks to the status that Foul Existence had reached.
Yeah, well, like I said, man, the cops are our biggest fans. They made sure to show up at all the gigs.
Clearly, that's proof right there.
Yeah, but there was a lot of mayhem that night. And I kept hearing people like. So they put me in this holding cell that night, and I kept hearing people, or the lady, you can hear the woman. It was like the cell was kind of open, and the desk. I just kept hearing her going, "We haven't charged him yet." Click, and it was people trying to figure out where the hell I was and what they were going to charge me with, and they were getting pissed off because so many people kept calling, and because they didn't have any I wasn't doing anything, it was just stupid. They just needed somebody to arrest, and then they settled on disorderly conduct. Whatever, what a joke. But that was all good.
There you go. But that's a
right.
that's a connection right there.
Out.
It all balances.
Yeah, that's that karma you're talking about.
Yes, exactly. See, it's always in the mix, always in the mixing bowl. But yeah, that was a fun time.
I know he's not here to share his side too, but because Brian was the voice of the band, any thoughts on what his opinion was of the band, the legacy, and anything like that he may have shared with you over the years?
I still talk to Brian. I just talked to him not too long ago. I think Brian was, how do I put this? And maybe Scott, you can, where Scott and I might have been the engine, Brian, I'm trying to figure out an analogy. Maybe he was the horn.
He was our Jim Morrison, man.
I guess, even though, yeah, but we all had a great time, and I'm sure Brian looks back on that with a lot of fond memories. I should have probably tried to get a hold of him, but it was all fun stuff. I mean,
yeah, and Brian had a lot of weird ideas, just silly ideas. A lot of what came from his mind was because dude was working at Winn-Dixie. And so a lot of his ideas are filtered through the commercialism of working in a grocery store. So a very American punk rock band, if ever there was one. Like I said, Brian Small, he was our Jim Morrison. Absolutely. He was the spiritual heart and center of the Great Foul Existence for sure. And yeah, his legacy is intact. Absolutely.
and his naked show is one of his finest moments, I might add.
It's hard to top something like that.
Yeah, you can't beat that one.
No.
Yeah. Well, and I know Bob Montanaro, I know he has photos of that because I saw one of them. So I know he was there taking pictures that night, but we've lost contact.
I'm still traumatized. Some things you just can't unseen.
Right.
That's
true. That's true. I don't know if you need to reshare any photos of that.
No,
sometimes
sir.
it's just better
It's
left
funny,
in the memory.
Yeah, man, it was good stuff. Well, Brian was at the house when Gigi stayed there, and Gigi and him kind of, I don't think it was Gigi and him as much as Gigi was kind of like, he didn't really share Brian's, I don't know what the words are, but I was very happy that Brian made the decision to go stay at his girlfriend's that week. So, he wasn't around the house. Gigi it wasn't like he was being mean. It just, I think it would have, another body in there would have, complicated matters, but yeah, man, Brian's great. I've been Brian and I go back to our childhood. We used to skateboard together, and so we're lifelong mates. Just like, and Scott's not too far along. I mean, that's the cool thing, I think. And even though I haven't talked to Jerry forever, my guess is if he was on this call, it'd be just like yesterday. I mean, we were all pretty tight friends. We never had any blow ups or whatever. It just sucks that Donald, our guitar player, accidentally overdosed, and that was a bit of a bummer. But
when did he pass?
What year was that, Mark?
that had to be what, 95, 94?
Oh, wow. Okay, so
somewhere in there.
it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah. And I came down and we did like some little. They didn't have a traditional funeral. Donald was kind of on the outs of this family most of the time I knew him, so they didn't really have a funeral for him. But we did a pretty cool remembrance for him and all that. And it's just unfortunate because Donald was so freaking talented, and it just, he couldn't get out of his own way, and
did he ever share any stories at all or memories with either of you from his time in Foul Existence?
Oh, he loved being in Foul Existence. That was his, actually, had it not been for Foul Existence, Donald would have probably died a lot sooner. Because he was just, he had a lot of, Donald, and I love the guy, like, I mean, he's a brother, but he was, he had a lot of issues, and Foul was, and punk rock in general, it was a really good creative outlet for him to, be able to, kind of get into the flow of his artistic prowess. So he was really talented.
I think punk rock did that for a lot of people. I think Donald was a good example of how, there were a lot of barriers. If you were an artist, a musician, back in the 70s, the late 70s, even into the early 80s in the US, unless you could play guitar, like Eddie Van Halen, or you had a record contract with one of the big labels, there was no hope for you. Punk rock brought the barriers down, took away all those obstacles for entry, and a creative person like Donald could just jump right in there and do his thing and flourish. And that was the beauty of punk rock, was, making it accessible to anybody. If you had a burning desire in your heart, you could make great music, and you didn't need to, shred like Eddie Van Halen to make great music. And Dolan, a tragic loss.
Yeah. Really
were there any other members of the band that we may not have talked about yet, who you wanted to
our original singer was a dude named, it was a guy named Sal Sewage, and he
that's very punk.
Yeah. Well, his real name is Don Hover, but we always
that's not very punk.
Right. And it's kind of funny because he was actually me, Brian, and Sal were the we just decided one day to get really drunk and start a band. And but he ended up Sal ended up going on to do other things, and he's actually played in the band, I think, that opened up for you guys, Scott, called The Blame.
Yeah.
And then he moved up to New York and did a bunch of industrial music. He's still making music today. I still am in touch with him as well, but he just kind of drifted on. I think I forget why he left. I think he just got sick of us being jackasses, and he was trying to be a little more serious.
Was that his first band, Foul Existence?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
And I had met Sal in Vero Beach one day. I forget where we were. It was just like, if I remember, I was like in the store and I was wearing a shirt, and he commented on it, and that's how it was back then. If you had somebody that was wearing a whatever De Croixon shirt, hey man, that's a great album. Next thing you know, you guys are having beers together because there weren't many people around, so you just gravitated, and that's kind of how it was with Sal. And next thing we know, we're doing this, that, and the other thing, and but yeah, Sal, I think, wanted to be a little more serious, and we were just idiots, so.
Anyone else come to mind? We haven't talked
That was
about?
That was it. That was all
it.
the
You
memories.
mentioned Sal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That was it.
Did you guys have anyone else close, like anyone else that was really close to the band? May not have been in the band, but they helped out with booking shows or anything like that?
Scott was the booker.
Yeah.
Was the booker?
Yeah. You know, it was all DIY stuff back then, man, you know. I had contacts and I knew people from, the other band I was in and being at the record store and stuff like that. So I was able to leverage that into doing other stuff for the band. But yeah, man, we did it all. You know how it is. To make the flyers, draw up the artwork,
Lie to get
all in house.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It was, and that, there was something really cool and special about all that, that you just can't get now because of the internet,
Yeah.
Scott was he was our social media, because it was like,
Yeah.
the record bar was the place, and Scott was always there. So bands could call him. But in terms of people around us and everything, I think it was just, we had a core group of people that would go to every show, and that were those skateboarder kids.
Yeah.
They loved us, so maybe those guys. But past that, I think a lot of people also, like friends that weren't involved in the punk rock stuff as much, but knew at least me, they just were like, God, you guys are terrible. And are you sure you want to be doing it? Because it was so like off-putting if you weren't in it, like,
Right.
Man, you guys can't play, the Grand Illusion by Styx. What are you doing, or whatever. So,
Well, just speaking about the Foul Existence output just for a moment, I'd love to hear your favorite Foul Existence song. If you had to choose one track in particular that's your personal favorite, which track would that be?
Now, for me personally, it is the great prog rock epic that Brian came up with called Beatrice. See, nobody even remembers the conglomeration that was supposed to be. But back in the 80s, that was like going to be Unilever or the new Procter and Gamble. And it was really scary because their little jingles started popping up everywhere. We're Beatrice. And Brian thought that was really cute. So we turned it into a mega 95-second prog rock epic that just still sticks in my head as one of our highlights.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Beatrice was I like that one. And I don't know, man. I don't know. TV Coma was kind of cool. I don't know. But Beatrice was definitely, I think, maybe because of that little jingly country kind of opening. And yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
You built it like a jingle. It was genius. I mean, you're talking about a corporate entity and how evil they are. So, construct your song as the jingle that you're, renouncing. So I thought it was pretty clever.
Yeah, I think that was a good one, Beatrice. So I'd go with that one too.
Okay.
It's a fun little toe tapper, as Joe Strong would say.
It is. It definitely, and I think too, because it kind of has that a little country opening too, a little bit.
Yeah, and that's the little hook that draws you in.
Donald was good at that. He was real good at that clean tone. Would kind of sucker you in. Well, maybe they're okay. Maybe these fellas. I think that's from living in Fort Pierce, right?
I was going to ask that because the Fort Pierce, being country.
Oh yeah.
Did that have an influence?
I think so. I don't think that's an accident. Not one little bit, because we were all friends with what's his name? Joey Stewart. Who was his dad?
Gary Stewart.
Yeah, we were all friends with Joey. So absolutely, the country and Western was never far from our musical minds when we were doing what we were doing.
Well, Joey used to show up at punk night all the time, and his dad, used to be a hero to all the guys in the countryside, because Gary Stewart was like, this big international country star from little old Fort Pierce, so that was, it was kind of funny. So I think it's just kind of baked in the DNA, and Donald was born and raised there, so it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Yeah.
Boy, poor Joey. He ended up killing himself.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. R.I.P.
It's been great having you both on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and tell the story. First time it was untold in this level of detail. So Scott, Mark, really appreciate you coming on. And of course, all the members of Foul Existence over the years, and RIP Donald, of course.
Yes.
And it's just been
Thank
great
you.
having you on to tell that story. And as we get ready to close things out, I would love to give each of you the last word to share any final thoughts or comments to fans and supporters of Foul Existence. Whoever wants to start us off, take us home.
Yeah, I'll go first. It looks like Mark is thinking. Anyway, yeah. Lately, I have been doing a YouTube channel called The Prog Corner, where we take a look at the other side of the musical equation. You know, prog rock and punk rock, the two greatest genres of music ever. And yes, they are a lot more similar than you think. And so that's what I've been doing with my days here since I don't actually play anymore. Those days are over. I can't even remember the last time I picked up a guitar, Mark.
Wow, that's
It's
shocking.
been a while.
You have talent leaking out of every pore of your body. So
The YouTube channel takes a lot out of me.
yeah, well, it is. And your YouTube channel is kicking butt. So I suggest anybody that's watching this, pop on over there and check it out. The Prog Corner. It's really cool. Even if you're not a big prog fan, you'll enjoy the banter. Scott's awesome at it. My final thoughts and what I'm doing, I'm kind of just running punk media right now. We've got some releases coming up. We got a Gigi Allen Tiny Tim split 12-inch that's going to be released on TPOS, and I'm doing some work with the Double Truckers out of Jensen Beach. I'm editing a skate video for them right now. I've been slacking for the last month or so I'm off my game, kind of getting back into it. But I guess, I just want to thank you for having giving us the opportunity to come on and talk about Foul. It's something that's been long buried, probably for good reason. So it's kind of interesting to talk about this and turn people on to that little slice of Fort Pierce heaven, So really appreciate everybody checking out the stuff, and the Prog Corner on YouTube and Punk Media on YouTube, and you can see what we're both doing.